Good morning. My expression of courage right off the bat is to follow Dr. Cornel West. Thank you for listening. I was literally beginning to tweet Brother Cornel West, making a powerful case for intellectual diversity rather than reducing individuals to labels. If somebody would tweet that out, I would really appreciate it, because this, friends, is where I think diversity goes wrong today. We're so quick to leave diversity at the superficial. How many African Americans are there in the room? How many Muslims are there in the room? How many women? How many gay and lesbian people? But the reality is that individuals who belong to identity groups remain individuals at the same time as they are members of communities. They don't give up their individuality unless they're expected to. Let me give you an example of how individuality flourishes in the realm that I know most intimately, my family. My mother is here in this audience. She's visiting me. She's from Vancouver. And the other night, we had a friend over for dinner and got into a fascinating, for me, fascinating discussion about the Charlie Hebdo cartoons. Mom and I had not spoken about these ever since the shootings in Paris. She lives 3 hours in a different time zone, 3 hours away. Tried, scheduling something late at night by phone. I'm too tired. In the morning, she's not up. It's not workable. And so this conversation was literally our first about the cartoons. And Mom asked me, why do these people, the editors of the Charlie Hebdo cartoons and the magazine, why do they insist on jabbing? And I said, Ma, it may be that they're not intending just to jab Muslims. It's possible that they're standing for a much bigger principle, a wider principle, namely that the freedom of expression of Muslims in France relies on the freedom of expression of atheists and others in France, so that everybody can thrive when everybody's right to express his or her opinion is respected. I thought that was a bold and brilliant and noble argument. And my mom said, but you don't see Muslims offending atheists. And I said, Ma, please, for many atheists, not all, but for many atheists, the very fact that Muslims wear what they choose to wear in most realms, even in a country like France, is offensive. But you don't see atheists shooting and killing the Muslims who choose to wear what they call Islamic clothing, even though that's offensive to many. And she said to me, that is such a lame argument. She said that. She said, no, I don't buy it, because they are doing what they believe is right for their religion. My mom, by the way, does not wear hijab. She is an uncovered, very liberal Muslim woman. You don't see these Muslims going out to offend. That is not their intention. Their intention is to be true to what they believe is their religion. But the Charlie Hebdo magazine editors, their intention was to offend, and that is the big difference. I have to tell you, that was a healthier, more robust counter-argument to me than anything that I've experienced in doing my many interviews on CNN and MSNBC. The point is, she's a Muslim woman. I'm a Muslim woman. She's pretty damn liberal. I'm pretty damn liberal. And yet, we fundamentally disagree on this issue. I have what Brother West might call the right to be wrong in my mother's eyes. So people who belong to the same identity communities do not always think alike. And that is the value of diversity. That diversity is not just about skin color and gender and sexuality and religion. It's also about thought and viewpoint. And different people have different ideas, and those ideas will naturally rub other people the wrong way. So here's the key that I'd like for us to understand. Offense is not a problem to be avoided at any cost. Offense is the cost of honest diversity. In my many years of touring with both the Trouble with Islam Today and now Allah, Liberty, and Love, I've spoken with people all around the world who, like my mom, have made the case for self-censorship. I remember a London School of Economics professor having breakfast with me at the World Economic Forum several years ago in the wake of the Danish cartoon crisis. And he said to me, growling, he said, if you know that something is going to be offensive, don't do it. It's as simple as that. Don't do it. The problem I have with that argument is that progress doesn't take place without offending somebody. Take pop culture, Slumdog Millionaire. In that movie was a scene in which the Muslim main character, played by Dev Patel, falls in love with a Hindu woman, Frida Pinto. On the basis of that scene alone, in India, a group called the Hindu People's Awakening Party called for a ban on Slumdog Millionaire. Now, here is a scene about pluralism, about love, about transgressing tribal boundaries for the sake of a greater good. Yes, it's true, I see it that way. Not everybody does. But the point is that sometimes, for the sake of real diversity, sometimes you've got to offend with diabolically decent acts. Elie Wiesel, you might recall, when the Holocaust Memorial Museum, National Holocaust Memorial Museum, was being opened in Washington, D.C. several years ago, he took the stage. President Clinton was next to him, and he turned his head and he said, "Mr. President, we must do something, anything, about the genocide of Muslims in Bosnia." Now, many Jews in that audience were appalled that Professor Wiesel would use this opportunity in honor of the Holocaust to raise what they considered a different issue. Professor Wiesel knew that he would be offending many of his fellow Jews. But he seized the opportunity anyway because, as he put it, we, victims of the Holocaust, have no right to be silent when cities are being turned into cemeteries. And indeed, 2 years later, the US began cooperating with the UN on humanitarian and, yes, military intervention in the genocide of Bosnia, for which many Muslims around the world are today deeply grateful. Well, that brings me then to a more complicated time in our life, namely this time, our time, a time of rampant social media, where the nastiest, filthiest, ugliest things are said and disseminated. During my 10-year global conversation about the trouble with Islam today, I was on the receiving end of many statements calling for the end of my life. I remember, ironically, doing an interview with Sir David Frost on Al Jazeera International about free expression. And immediately after that video was posted on YouTube, the very first comment that was posted was, "Kill this whore now." A few posts later, somebody took my would-be assassin to task. When I went back to take a screenshot of that comment, it had been deleted. It had been deleted by YouTube. That is to say, the comment about killing this whore now. And I wrote to YouTube to say, no, you must post this. You must leave it up. Why? Because if we are smoothing out the roughest edges of legitimate debate, the comments themselves may be very ugly, but the debate about free expression is legitimate. If we are smoothing out the roughest edges of that debate, or any for that matter, we don't know what any of us is up against. And I actually said to YouTube in my letter, I hereby waive any liability that you may feel to protect my life. Because I'm not here doing this to play it ultra safe. I'm not going to be reckless, and I don't think this is reckless, but this is about, for me, intellectual honesty and diversity of expression. And so I come back to the Charlie Hebdo cartoons. You know, when PBS and the New York Times decided not to run those cartoons, they made an interesting argument for why they would not. Each of them said, in essence, viewers of PBS NewsHour and readers of the New York Times can find those cartoons anywhere on the web. We don't need to reprint them. And they were right. You can find them anywhere. And the more I reflected on that argument, the more something dawned on me. It's precisely because offense is everywhere today that the question no longer is, where's the line? We'll each draw the line differently. The line is repeatedly crossed. It is repeatedly violated. And that's not going to change. So the question is no longer, where is the line? The question now is, in an era where the line is visibly transgressed, how do we make differences work for us? How do we turn conflict into constructive conflict? Not merely dialogue, constructive conflict, as opposed to destructive conflict. That, in part, is what my next book will address. Thank you.